My name is Spencer Higa, and you're listening to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast.
Boom! I've only have one tool to tie the fly, and his name's Jason.
What's the secret to catching those things?
Oh man, I wish I knew a secret to catch those. I think the secret to catching them is fish for about 5 or 6 days at a time and hope to catch one.
This guy worked out eating a donut.
Just stick them solid.
Welcome to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast, your source for fly fishing talk, tips, and stories. In this episode, I visit with Fly Fishing Team USA member Lance Egan to talk competition angling. Lance has been a member of Team USA for over a decade and recently competed at Worlds. He shares some of his experience from World competition and discusses some of the techniques he uses to be one of the best anglers out there. Whether you have interest in competition angling or not, Lance shares knowledge that can help each of us become better fishermen on our local waters. We hope you enjoy our podcast. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and our YouTube channel. I'm Chad Nelson, and here is today's podcast. All right, guys, welcome to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast. I am here with Fly Fishing Team USA member Lance Egan, one of the greatest in the sport of competition fly fishing. And Lance drove all the way over to my house just to be on this podcast.
It was a long drive. At least 8 to 10 minutes, maybe.
Well, regardless, appreciate you coming over.
You bet.
Super cool of you. I've been wanting to do this podcast with Lance for some time now. He's a member of Team USA, and they just had Worlds competition.
Yeah. Lance
has been a member of Team USA for a long time, and so we're going to kind of get into a little bit of that, competition fishing, Worlds.
Okay.
But first, have you been out on the water lately?
Yeah, I've been doing a little bit of lake fishing lately. A little bit up on Strawberry, our local reservoir that has lots of nice fish in it, and some other places that shall go unnamed. But and then been fishing the local rivers a bit as well. Fishing's been good. We finally got a little cold snap recently, so maybe winter is going to show, and hopefully we get some water for next year, right?
Oh man, yeah. Jason and I were out on Joe's Valley Reservoir. I mean, all the reservoirs are just as low as I ever remember them.
They are low. Speaking of Jason, we're missing him today. Where is that guy?
Yeah, so Jason's on kid duty today.
Kid duty. Jason, good luck.
He's winning Husband of the Year award today. He'd much rather be here with us. So.
Oh, he loves his kids though, right?
Oh, he's a good dad.
Got to take the time.
Yeah, so we're missing him, so it's just Lance and I today.
We apologize. You won't have Jason's crazy wit, but otherwise we'll probably survive.
No crazy wit, no air guitar, no Metallica. So I wanted to ask you though, so you've been fishing recently. Mm-hmm. Did you notice any change in the feeding or fish behavior with that big supermoon we just had?
I can't say that I did. No, I fished. We just had a real cool down, as you know. Our viewers won't know, but yesterday for the first time it kind of snowed here in the valley, right? Mm-hmm. Probably 30, maybe 40 or 50 degree temperature swing for the change to the colder.
Yeah.
I caught a day just before that hit, and we were still kind of on the tail end of that supermoon, and fishing was fantastic. So I didn't see any, at least negative effects. Maybe positive, possibly.
Yeah.
I guess. Working in shops, I get a question like that a lot. We get asked frequently, do you pay attention to the moon phases as far as fishing goes? And if you do, by all means, keep doing it. If you have a lot of confidence in it, go for it. My theory has always been, if I have time to go fishing, I couldn't care any less what the moon's doing. I'm going.
That's right.
I'm out. If it makes you catch a few less fish, oh well. I'd rather be fishing than worrying about the moon.
Well, yeah, as the saying goes, a bad day on the water is still better than a good day in the office. And
fair.
I agree. I mean, cold, windy, rainy, I don't care. If I have a chance to get out, I'm there.
Yeah.
So speaking of Joe's Valley, that's a local reservoir here in Utah. My first time fishing it. My first time fishing for tiger muskie. Have you ever caught muskie before?
Yeah.
So I've heard some people say that's the fish of 1,000 casts. Mm-hmm. And I about wet my pants, Lance. I was
fishing from shore, and I'm stripping my streamer in, and it's about 4 feet from shore, and I'm just about to lift my fly out and recast again. And all of a sudden I see this dark shadow come up from the bottom, and that thing had to have been over 3 feet long.
Nice.
Monster.
Good tiger.
It was a great tiger. I'd never really seen a fish that big, and I'm thinking, eat it, eat it, eat it. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to lose my fly if he eats it.
Because you're not fishing for tigers.
I wasn't fishing for tiger. I knew they were in there.
Yeah.
But I had 3X on.
Yeah.
Just fishing for, they had splake in
Yes.
there and cutties.
Sure.
But anyhow, Jason had a 4-footer come up to his fly, although he had 20-pound tippet on. He was in go big or go home mode.
Got it.
But neither of us landed a muskie that day. Several of them came up, put their nose right on the fly, but shied away.
Yeah.
What's the secret to catching those things?
Oh man, I wish I knew a secret to catch those. I think the secret to catching them is fish for about 5 or 6 days at a time and hope to catch one. That's maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but for me, tiger muskie have always been really difficult to catch for sure. They tend to be a fish that, for me, is either all on or all off, and they'll seem like they're all on all the time because they almost always follow. So
Yeah.
I get a lot of fish that, just like you described, here comes your fly, and they will put their nose on the fly, and it doesn't matter whether you speed it up, slow it down, let it fall. They just keep on it. Sometimes if you let it fall, they go with it, but then they just lose interest. Then you move it, and they come right back to it.
Yeah.
They just, it's almost as if they don't want to feed. I know you could sit here all day, we could second guess about fly colors and retrieves and depths and on and on and on, but my experience is they either want to eat or they don't want to eat, and that's not to say that a certain fly wouldn't work better than another, because it could. But most of the days when I've caught tiger muskie, I've had several hits and sometimes landed 2 or 3 of them, and then more days than those. So I've had days where you're describing. You cast, and it doesn't matter what you throw, they follow stuff. Some things they follow more than others, but they just don't ever lock onto it.
Yeah.
I think that's the nature of the beast, that you get a lot of follows. Certainly you want to play with the figure 8 at the end of the retrieve.
Yeah.
You want to try and induce a strike at the end. There you feel like they're an apex predator. If you ever fish them from a boat, you'll know quickly that where trout will follow right to the boat, see the boat and jet, the tiger muskie will just kind of hang near the boat. They'll follow your fly to it. They don't even care about the boat. They'll go right below it, almost circle the boat, like they're a shark. I think they're unaware that the boat is dangerous.
Yeah. Well, they did that to us from the shore. I mean, that 4-footer that Jason had, he had his nose right on Jason's fly, and that was 3 feet from the bank. And, they're just looking right up at us. They know we're there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can still scare them, of course. I've been wading shorelines before and just push them off, your shadow or whatever. They're still they have some instincts, right? They still know when they're in trouble. But when they're chasing something, it's as if their fleeing instinct is shut off and they're just on the prowl to eat. Although they don't eat very often.
Yeah. Well, Jason did have one hit and he missed it, but he was casting. He was 50 feet up on a cliff, and maybe it was hard to set the hook. I mean,
probably so.
He had 120 feet of line out at least.
You'd have a lot of line hanging from your rod tip down with a lot of slack to make up for sure from that high. And then if he had have hooked him, then what would you do?
Exactly. Yeah, jump in, Jason.
Right. Go for a swim.
Well, super cool fish. I hope to hook one of these days.
They are fun. Yeah, I would say keep after them. They're a fun fish. They jump. They're really cool. Definitely a challenge, though.
Well, yeah, and we saw a few rising. I mean, I think they were chasing, that lake had a bunch of the 12 to 18 inch splake in it and cutties, and we saw these muskie come flying out of the water a few times.
Nice.
Chasing those fish. And
very cool.
Yeah, it was like nothing I'd ever heard before.
Cool.
A 4-foot fish flying out of the lake. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's good times.
Well, so I wanted to ask you and talk about, you just finished up Worlds. You've been a member of Fly Fishing Team USA. So just wanted to talk a little bit about competition angling, your experience in it. So let's start with you, Lance. You've been a member of Fly Fishing Team USA for how many years?
Let's see. This is my 13th year. 13th year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have to re-qualify every year?
Yeah, you do. I guess not always every year. Some years sometimes it's a 18-month or 24-month cycle, but you have to re-qualify every cycle. So We have, in a perfect world, we would have the World Championships every year in the same month. Let's just say June, right? So if you had a World Championship in June every single year, and then you could plan regionals and nationals around that. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen because sometimes the World Championships are in May, sometimes they're in March, sometimes they're in September, sometimes they're in June, right? Sometimes they're in July. They span depending on where it is and what the best time for fishing is and that sort of thing. They vary quite a bit. So some years, if we had, like this year, we had World Championships were in September, kind of mid to late September. Next year we have them again in September, so we'll have a nationals in between.
Okay.
Where last year we had one in. Let's see, we had one in, it was June, and then the following September we were okay there as well, had a nationals. But sometimes where you have one in September and one in May, there's not enough room between those two, right, to have a full cycle of regionals and accrue points and really have a good season, if you will, for the team to kind of be settled out. So sometimes it's a 1.5 or 2 year cycle, but otherwise, yes, that's the long answer to your question. You do have to requalify. It's run strictly on points. No favoritism. You got to go to regionals. You got to go to nationals. The top 15 points earners, they're on Team USA.
Okay, so 15 guys make it, and you qualify from regional events.
Correct. Yep.
And a certain number of regional events, or how many do they have to
again, it depends a bit on the cycle, but generally you can count 2 in a long cycle. You might be able to count 3 regionals, and then you can count national championships for points also. So you accrue points at all those, but there's no limit as far as people could go to 6 or 7 regionals if they can get into them. Mm-hmm. They'll only count their 2 highest. It's uncommon that we don't often even have 6 or 7. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but I guess my point is you're not limited to just a couple. You could go to several. Most people don't have the time nor the money to, or maybe even the want to go to that many of them. But
it betters your odds of scoring more points.
Certainly betters your odds of scoring more points, no doubt about it, yes. Mm-hmm.
And points are based on basically number of catches, but also the size of the fish is factored in. Is that correct?
In each competition, yes. So there's two types of points. There's fish points and placing points. Fish points are every scoreable trout is worth 100 points, and then you get 20 points for every centimeter they are long, right? So those are fish points. Then you have placing points. So in a competition, there are usually 4 to 5 sessions, 3-hour sessions, and each session you're in a group, and that group all goes to one venue at a time. So if we had one locally, we might our group would maybe run to the Provo River. We were in the A group, let's say. B group might be on the Weber, and on, right?
Yeah.
So we're only competing against the people in our group for 3 hours, right? In light conditions. It wouldn't necessarily be fair for the people on the Provo to go up against people on the Weber. The Weber has far less fish per mile. The average catch rates might be lower, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So you're only competing against people in your group and only on that venue at the same time. So as we go to that venue, let's say there were 15 beats. Whoever catches the most total centimeters of fish in that 3 hours, and the beats are randomly drawn. Beats are usually 100 to maybe 300 yards long. Whoever catches the most total centimeters, total fish points, gets first place. That's your placing point. So placing points you want to be low. A 1 is the best placing point. In a 15-man group, 15 would be the worst.
Yep.
And you want fish points to be high. At the end of, let's say, the World Championships, at the end of the 5 sessions, whoever has the least amount of placing points wins, and on down the line. And if there are ties in placing points, which there are oftentimes, then fish points change that, break that tie. It's uncommon to have a tie in both placing points and fish points because fish points vary quite a bit. But if there is, then there's other ways biggest fish after that will break another tie, and on and on.
When I read that in regards to the beats, some of them only being 100 meters long, I was shocked by that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess you're used to that, but
I'm not. I hate 100-meter beats. Yeah, that's too short. We prefer more 250, 300, meter yards, somewhere in there. Certainly, more water is an advantage, right? It doesn't get beat up as much, recovers faster, could have more fish. But they do vary. Ideally, in a competition, whoever is setting up the beats will have a pretty good understanding of water types and holding water.
Yeah.
And you might have a really good holding water piece that's maybe 150, 200 yards long, and then right down adjacent to it you might have lesser quality water that might be 300 yards long. So the idea being that both beats have more or less equal opportunity. It's never totally equal, but
yeah.
It's a live river.
In some cases, are you fishing a beat in the afternoon that a guy fished in the morning?
Always, yeah. The
Always.
first session is the only one that's virgin, if you will. The first session, you're on a beat that nobody's touched. Second session, you're fishing right behind somebody. In the World Championships, you're fishing behind one of the world's best competition anglers. And they just beat it up for 3 hours, and then it rests for usually 2 to 3 hours over a lunch period and a transition time to move from venue to venue. And then you have to get it in the afternoon and think, okay, what did the person this morning do? Where would they have caught their fish? I need to catch some there, and I also need to think out of the box and maybe cover water types that they hadn't. And then it progressively gets harder. It rests overnight, but in the next morning, a guy fishes the same beat that 2 people fished on the first day, and in the afternoon you're fishing behind 3 people, and then morning of the final day you're fishing behind 4 people. So the catch rates should, in theory, drop. They don't always, because conditions change. Hatches, air temperature, water temperature all play in. The quality of the angler fishing the beat can make a difference too. Sometimes you'll see a beat. I had a World Championship beat on the Upper Eagle River this year that produced, I think, 2 fish the first session, 5 fish the second and third session, not combined, but 5 fish each, so 12 fish total. Then fourth session, Lubos Rosa from the Czech Republic got 19. So he beat the first 3 guys by himself. And then I got to fish it right behind Lubos. By saying I got to, that's not good. You don't want to fish behind Lubos. But I got it very last, and I managed 14 fish, which was pretty good. I would rather have been the high guy on the roster there, but given that it had only given up a few fish in the first few sessions, and then I got it immediately after Mr. Czech Republic had beat it up, I did what I could.
That's amazing to me that you guys can do that. I mean, that just shows the quality and your knowledge and skill that you guys can come in behind a world class type guy and still pull out 15 to 20 fish in that short of a stretch on a river.
Or it tells you that you're crazy enough to spend most of the 3 hours on your hands and knees. You're begging the fish. Yeah, it's a different game for sure. Not everybody's interested in competition fishing. I get that. It's not for everybody for sure. Frankly, it's in our country. I think most anglers look at it with a bit of disdain. They don't love it. It's widely misunderstood in my opinion. I think competition's a lot of fun. It's obviously not for everyone, but for me at least, it's made me a way better angler. It's made me look at myself and try and find ways to improve, find the techniques and the situations in which I don't excel, and look at those and attack them and make myself a better angler, which has improved my everyday fishing. I guess one of the questions I get often about competitions is it doesn't take the fun out of it, and not for me it doesn't, no, because I really love it. I'm still fishing. Once you're on your beat, there's a little bit of pressure that I put on myself, and each of them I expect to do well, but I don't really feel a lot of outside pressure. But there's a little pressure for me that I don't always like that. Sometimes I get that pressure and go, what am I doing here, right? But as soon as they say start, all you're doing is fishing, and you're not competing with somebody else on the same piece of water. It's just a challenge. It's you versus the fish in this particular stretch of water that you've randomly drawn. And it may not be water you like, it may be water you love. Either way, you have the task of trying to catch as many fish as you can in that short stretch in that amount of time. And it's a fun challenge. It's something that most people never do, and it helps you grow. It certainly has me.
Well, for sure. And I think that's an attitude that anybody can take to the river or lake where they're fishing. Maybe you're not a member of a team, you're not in a competition, but it's still you against the fish.
It's always that, right? There's always an element of competition.
Yeah, and regardless of your skill level, if you're fishing with a buddy that's better than you, that's fine. Don't compare yourself to him.
Sure.
It's just you against what you did last time.
Right.
So in regards to competition, Lance, maybe talk about some of the rules that guys may not be familiar with.
Okay. Well, the Phipps Moosh rules, you can look them up online if you're interested in them. They're a bit long. They're a long read, and they're a little hard to understand because they're translated.
I couldn't even say that word. What's
Phipps Moosh? It's like Fédération Internationale Pêche Sportive or something like that. International Sport Fishing Federation, if you will.
Yeah.
I think it's French, and moucher is fly, so it's sport fishing with a fly. Phipps Moosh has they're the organizing body, if you will, and they oversee all of the competition for fly fishing in the World Championships anyway. They have the rules online. I guess to highlight maybe some of the rules that that I encountered when I started doing it that were uncomfortable for me. One, there's a leader rule. So there's a leader rule that says the leader can be no longer than 2 times the length of the rod you're using. You can only use a rod up to 12 feet, so they're a maximum of 22 feet, but only, 24 feet. No, they're not even that. You can use a rod up to 12 feet, but you can only have a leader up to 22 feet. But it still can never be more than twice the length of the rod, except in the case that it's, I guess not in any exception. So 10-foot rod, 20-foot leader, and on and on.
Have you ever used longer than a 9-foot rod?
All the time, yeah. I very rarely fish a 9-foot rod. I usually
really?
fish longer. Yeah.
And what's the reason for that?
10-foot rods give you, on a river especially, give you a lot of reach, allow you to fish farther away. You can just, it's not a big difference going from a 9 to a 10, let's say, but every 4 or 5 feet you can save and get the same presentation quality-wise, but stay that much farther from the fish, the better off you are.
Yeah, makes sense.
For most situations, longer rods mend and manipulate line better. They reposition line better. They're longer levers, so they set the hook. They move more line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Lots of advantages in today's world with fly rods getting lighter and lighter. A 10-footer now weighs less than a 8.5-footer did just less than a decade ago.
True.
So they're really, really light. Anyhow, yeah, most of the time we use long rods. But rule highlights, so you have to have a leader that's no more than twice the length of your rod, okay? On that leader, you can add nothing that floats or sinks the leader other than flies. So you can't fish a strike indicator, you can't fish split shot or sinkers. It doesn't say anything about split shot in there, it just says you can't add anything to the leader that would sink it other than a fly.
Right.
So for nymphing purposes, this was the major hurdle for most people getting into competition fishing. The way that we're taught, most of us anyway in the U.S. to nymph fish is with strike indicator,
right.
And most of the time with split shot. There are those that will also do high stick nymphing where they're fishing shot, often on the bottom without an indicator.
Yeah.
But they're usually using a 9-foot rod and a leader that's short and not really advantageous to fish very far away. It works really well in some situations, not in all. But most of us, myself included, I learned to nymph fish with an indicator and split shot. Whether you put split shot above the flies or on a bounce rig down below the flies doesn't really matter. Just the indicator and weights to get you down, indicator to stay in contact. Going from that to European style nymphing for me was quite a challenge. Again, when I started doing this 13 years ago, even with the web, there was virtually nothing on the web to really teach you how to do it. The team at that time, Team USA, had the blessing of being influenced by Vladi. Vladi's a former world champion angler and a Polish angler, and he'd kind of befriended Team USA and showed us some of his secrets, if you will. And from his initial coaching, we've then branched out to where we understand a bit more about the longer leaders. The process is always evolving, right? So it's changed from what Vladi originally showed us, but he helped us just get on the right path and helped out a lot.
So now, when you get out on the Provo here, our local river, do you ever fish strike indicators or split shot, or I
really don't, no.
You're strictly European style now?
Not strictly 100% on the Provo. I don't fish indicators. There's a time and a place for indicators. There's no one technique that's the perfect technique for every situation, right?
Right.
For me, when I'm wading, it's rare that I fish indicators as a wading angler. For me, European style nymphing increases strike detection. You get better drifts. You can cover different water types. I can fish a lot shallower than I can with an indicator rig with Euro style stuff.
Yeah.
I can, just water type, strike detection, drift, etc., etc. It's a better rig for wading anglers. That said, from a drift boat, when I'm drifting in my drift boat down a big river, European nymphing I don't think is the best for that. It sometimes works, but with an indicator you can fish out ahead of the boat a lot farther, or out to the side of the boat further away, where the boat's kind of a big ominous thing with oars and everything. You can't fish right underneath it most of the time in most rivers. There are exceptions, but generally speaking you need to fish 30, 40, 50 feet away, and the indicator is the best way to suspend your rig out there at distance.
Yeah.
And then there are times as a wading angler where, again, usually on big rivers where you can't get very close to the fish, where I feel an indicator is a better option. But for most of our, second driest state in the country, rivers here in Utah, we have mostly small rivers, right? So our smaller waters, and then really mostly we have creeks. and you can not only wade anywhere on them, half of them you can hop across.
Right.
So an indicator is not always necessary here. Yeah, certainly on the Provo and the Weber, I haven't used an indicator in a long, long time. Just not something. If I felt it was an advantage, I would do it. I just don't. I used to, and once I got comfortable with Euro nymphing, not so much.
Do you have a favorite style of fishing, like nymphing, dries, streamers?
Well, certainly, if I had to pick a favorite style, I love dry fly fishing. I think that's my favorite. But that said, I love all fly fishing. It's a real treat and a challenge, I think, to just try and get good at all of the techniques. I love streamer fishing. I love fishing lakes. I fish lakes a lot. I love to fish dries. I love a dry and a dropper. I love nymphing. I'm not really particular.
You just like fishing.
I love fishing. That's safe to say. If I had a weak link, my weakest link is probably swinging wet flies. I do it, and I do it at a decent level, but I don't do it, in my opinion, I don't do it anywhere near as well as I do some of the other techniques. I've spent much less time doing it. I get fish to eat. I don't land very many of the fish. I don't hook very many of the fish that I feel like I get to hit.
Yeah.
It's a low percentage technique for me, so I'm either not very good at it, which I'm sure is the case, or just the technique itself isn't a very high percentage, hook to landing ratio.
And that modest statement coming from the reigning U.S. fly fishing national champion. So.
Wow, I have lots to learn. Trust me. It's situational as far as being national champion. Everything has to fall into place. You got to be a good angler, but you also have to. You got to have the right beats and fish behind the right people and be in the right group. And not only that, you got to have the right teammates. Teammates in a competition make a big difference. You wouldn't think so. It's just you and the fish, but the information you can gather from your teammates, if they're very well skilled and very highly skilled, they relay a lot of information to you, and you put that to use. It makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah. So speaking of your teammates, you guys just had the World Championship in Vail. Was it Vail, Colorado?
That's right.
Just a few months ago. How do you guys, well, first, how many of the 15 compete at Worlds? And then how do you guys go about preparing for your world competitions?
So 5 compete. We travel with five competitors, an alternate, a manager, and a captain. That's kind of how we roll. Whether it's here or overseas, that's what we take. The 5 competitors, as far as how do we prepare? Actually, I should say all of us, because not just the 5 competitors prepare. The alternate and the captain are also helping big time in the preparation.
Yeah.
This year, because we had it in more or less our home soil.
Was that exciting, or it's probably fun to travel overseas to a foreign country, but
definitely,
was there a lot of energy having it here local?
There was, yeah. We had a leg up because it was something we never experienced going to other countries. Usually when we travel for the World Championships, we go a week to 10 days ahead of time, and we pre-fish to try and learn the area. In this case, we'd probably had, 5 or 6 competitions on many of the venues we use in the World Championships over the last decade or so.
Yeah.
So we were all pretty familiar with them. The lake was off limits for everybody about 90 days ahead of the competition. So we actually had a practice a year previously in the exact same time that the World Championships would happen, so that we could kind of go into the Worlds with a lot of confidence with flies and techniques and things that should work in theory.
Smart, yeah.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. We had our sights set really, we wanted to win. Obviously, you always want to win. That said, last year in Bosnia was the first time we'd ever medaled as a team. We were silver medalists last year. This year we dropped to bronze, but I'm proud of our effort. We had some rough draws, as did many of the teams. With what we were given, I felt like we did a pretty good job. We really owned the lake. The lake was one of our highlights for sure. Josh Graffam had really put some time in on it and put together a really good lake program for us, and the rest of us just followed suit. So, starting with Pat Weiss on the first session, we never finished lower than first or second place on the lake in any of the 5 sessions.
Well, that's awesome. 2 years in a row, Team USA medaled.
Correct.
Silver and then bronze. So,
right.
That says you guys have really stepped up your game. And
we've improved. There's no doubt about that. We've had 3 individual medals ever as a team as well. Jeff Currier in I believe 2004, might have been 2003, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
He was the bronze medalist in Spain, and then Devin Olson last year was bronze medalist in Bosnia, and I was lucky enough to be bronze medalist individually this year in Vail. Unfortunately, the Americans so far,
Congratulations.
we just can't get over that hump, though. We're bronze, man. We're, as Ricky Bobby would say, we're the second loser, right? If you ain't first, you're last.
That's right.
It's fun. It's been a gold mine to medal, but I certainly would rather be atop the medals, not the bottom of the medals.
Well, you guys have some good momentum, and I have no doubt in the coming years you guys are going to someone's going to get silver, gold.
I hope you're right. Yeah, we have a great team. We work really well together. Got a lot of friendship there, a lot of experience with fishing with each other, so we know all of our strengths and weaknesses, and we know how to take information from each of the teammates and put that into our own fishing. And it's been a fun journey to see us go from finishing as a country in the high teens out of mid to high 20 teams that participate. Usually we have 28 to maybe 32 teams.
Wow.
That participate in the World Championships. And when I first got involved, the team was consistently, let's say, 15 or worse. I think they had one time when Jeff was when Courier was the bronze medalist, I think they were in 10th place. That was the best they'd ever done. And since then we've had one slip, but other than the 1 year of slippage, we've basically been in the top 10, and more recently in the last 4 or 5 years we've kind of stayed in the top 5. So we've definitely moved up, making some waves, I guess, in the competition world. I remember the first couple of World Championships, you'd get on the bus, and as an American, you get done fishing, and the other teams didn't even ask you how many you caught because they expected you to be way down the list. Nowadays, it's kind of fun to see that come full circle, and the best teams, they all ask you now. When you get on the bus, they want to know how the Americans did because they expect good results from us, and that's fun. That's good to see. We're trending the right direction.
Yeah, that is so cool. And so when you're at these competitions, is there a lot of rivalry between countries, or are you guys all part of a fly fishing brotherhood and a lot of friends formed with guys from competing countries?
Great question. That's something, again, that's really misunderstood, I think, in competition fishing. Everybody thinks of competition, anything, as just cutthroat, right? And there's no winnings here. There's no money. So if you win I have a couple of cheesy medals that, they probably got at Joe's Trophies or so. I don't know what they are. They're not high-end by any stretch. It's not the medal that you're after. It's the experience and the learning and the camaraderie of certainly the other countries, but also our own team. And to that, and the question really is, is everybody really competitive? And they are very competitive, but they're very civil too. As far as before the competition, I've been to I think 10 World Championships now, so I have a bunch of friends on other teams and from other countries. And when you see each other, hugs or it's definitely a brotherhood. But at the same time, there's a mutual respect that I wouldn't ask somebody from another team to try and give me a hint, and they wouldn't ask me. There's an understanding there that before and during the competition, that kind of stuff's off limits. However, after the competition, most people are pretty well an open book. Competition's over, everybody's happy to share, and we all learn from each other, and it's been a really neat experience because I guess you think of competition and you think everybody hates each other more or less, but they don't. I have open invitations to come to 100 different friends' places all over the world. If you come to Australia, I'll put you up. You come to Spain, I'll put you up. You come to wherever, you stay with me and we'll go fishing, and that's pretty cool.
Sweet, let's go.
We extend the same welcome here. That's right. Yeah, it's a fun group of people, all very high level anglers and people that just love the sport, have a passion for fishing, and have a really fun time competing against each other.
That's pretty cool. So 10 worlds for you, most of them in foreign countries. Mm-hmm. Which one or two places stand out in your mind? Maybe the beauty or the experience wasn't quite what you were expecting.
Man, lots of them do really. Some of the standouts, I would say, New Zealand was fantastic. We went there twice, once to pre-fish, and then a couple months later we went back for the actual competition. That was a fantastic experience. If you've ever viewed New Zealand fishing stuff, it's a beautiful place and has great fishing. That one we kind of anticipated though. Northern Italy was probably one of the ones that I wasn't expecting it to be good. You don't hear of Italy as being, at least from being from the U.S., you don't hear of Italy as being a destination for fly fishing. But it was really cool. Marble trout, large grayling. They had browns and rainbows also. It was quite beautiful. The Dolomites, the mountain range there, and it was gorgeous. Beautiful water, clear water, beautiful fish, and quite good fishing. I was impressed. That was one that I definitely didn't see coming.
I wouldn't have guessed. Northern Italy.
Yeah. Bosnia was much the same. Bosnia last year, I don't know, I think Bosnia is just a war-torn, place in shambles, right? We see it on CNN, and that's about it, right?
Well, yeah, you learn about it in school too.
Correct.
So.
And in the city, it's a little rough for sure, but you get out in the countryside, and it's gorgeous. It's green, crystal clear water. We also fished one of probably the dirtiest rivers I've ever fished, but generally speaking, they had fantastic fishing compared to what I thought we would experience. Again, beautiful grayling, lots of brown trout, some rainbows, a very cool place. And then one that you might expect, again, in fly fishing circles at least, Slovenia was gorgeous. Slovenia had crystal clear water. The Socha River is a very popular destination fishery there. Marble trout is what Slovenia is kind of famous for, but they have browns also and rainbows. It's a beautiful country too. Certainly very different culture than here, but fishing-wise, you get in the streams and the mountains, and you kind of just feel like you're at home in the West. It's it's different, trees and surroundings are different, but once you're in a river, you're in a trout river. Anywhere in the world, you're in a trout river.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so Worlds next year, where's it at?
Next year they are in Slovakia.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it could be a change of pace. We went to the Czech Republic a couple years ago, and I expect it to be similar to the Czech Republic. Supposed to be lots of grayling, some trout as well. It'll be interesting for sure.
When I hear Slovakia, I think of creatures with big fangs. Haunted forest.
Yeah, maybe there is some of that. I don't know. I haven't been, so I'm looking forward to it. I haven't actually decided yet whether I'm going or not. I've qualified, but I've got to do some soul searching and some chatting with my very patient, loving wife, and see what's on the docket there for me. But the team will have a team there for sure, and they'll be looking to do great whether I'm there or not.
Well, they'll miss you if you don't go, that's for sure.
They'll probably be glad to get rid of me. But hopefully I'll be there.
Yeah, I hope so too. Hope you can make that happen. Are all the world competitions the same in that you fish 5 beats? This last year it was 2 on the lake and 3 on the river.
This last year was 4 river, 1 lake.
Oh, 4 river, 1 lake.
So to answer your question, they're not always the same. No, it depends on the venues that they have available in each place. So when we were in Scotland, for instance, we fished 4 lakes and 1 river.
Oh, wow.
The river session there was terrible. You were trying to just catch a fish or 2. The lakes, you caught several fish usually. Most of the time, I would say it's most common to have 3 rivers, 2 lakes. But again, that varies depending on where you are.
Yeah, and what I found interesting too is, so the timing of the competition this year was late August, early September?
Yeah, kind of mid-September. Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably when the water level's at its lowest.
Correct.
So you guys are not fishing ideal conditions.
No, it was super low conditions. I think, I didn't organize it obviously, so I don't know, but my impression is John Knight, who organized the World Championships in Colorado, did a fantastic job, by the way. It was an awesome program, and everybody had a lot of fun. I think that his reasoning for doing it then is that's kind of their most predictable conditions, time of year, and least amount of fishing pressure. So that part of Colorado sees a fair bit of fishing pressure. They have great fishing there. And the last thing that we want to do as a competition happens is be in the way of lots of other recreational anglers. So a lot of competitions they actually do, a lot of our regionals, for instance, we do around, slough times, if you will, or slack times, where there's a really early spring or a really late fall, prime season. We don't want to be in the way of everybody else, so we try and push them to spring or fall. It's good fishing, spring and fall too. And then there's also an element of when are people available to help. So a lot of people that compete in our regionals and nationals are in the fly fishing industry. They're guides, they're shop workers, shop owners, that sort of thing. sales reps and on. And the busiest time for most of them is right dead middle of the summer. So it's hardest to have competitions then. So we had it in the fall, very low water on the river. Well, at least on the Eagle River, super, super low. I think the lowest I've ever seen it. The Blue River was higher than most years. Not the highest I've seen it, but it was moving. Yeah. And the Colorado River was kind of at a normal flow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, any exciting trips on the horizon for you?
No, not really. Not fishing trips. I'm planning a trip with my family to Mexico, and I'll probably try and sneak a little fishing in. But
Awesome.
Otherwise, I'll just spend the winter fishing around here, and probably won't get more than 2 or 3 hours away from home all winter. And yeah.
So salt flats in Mexico, bonefish, tarpon?
No. I think we'll just go down to Puerto Vallarta area, and if I fish, it'll just be fishing from the beach. Maybe find some, jetties or something that block surf for a marina, and find some little jacks, or it'll just be dinking around. Nothing serious.
Do you go anywhere without your fly rod?
I hope not to. I try to take it anywhere I can. If there's a chance of fishing, I would prefer to take a fly rod. I'm sure you're similar.
Absolutely. Yeah, I need to get a bigger truck. My truck keeps filling up with things I always want in it.
That's right.
Don't leave home without.
Yeah, your gas mileage is suffering because you've got a little extra baggage in there, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Lance, good info. Appreciate you coming by.
You bet. Thanks for
doing
having
this
me on.
podcast, and let's go hit it together sometime.
Let's make it happen. Let's go
Okay.
chase some big cutty selling strawberry.
Yes, for sure.
Cool.
Okay, guys. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Drop Jaw Flies podcast. Remember to stay safe on all of your fishing adventures and to stick 'em solid.
All right, friends, thanks for listening to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast. Please send us your feedback. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, and on our website, www.dropjawflies.com. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or on our YouTube channel. Now get out there and hook a big one and stick 'em solid.